Welcome to the Planning Committee on Wednesday the 22nd of November 2023. So I move on to the agenda, and apologies for absence. I'll just give the ones which are in the Labour group. Councillor Hasgrove, Scott, Stamp and Bowen are being substituted tonight by Price, Brown and Mandaveris. And Councillor Sands.
Yes, I'm subbing for Councillor Pearce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm subbing for Councillor Jim Gilbourne.
Okay.
And apologies, Chairman, I also understood late this afternoon that Councillor Lammas will not be appearing this evening.
Okay. So it's agreed that I signed the minutes of the previous meeting? Agreed. And should, just as I say that, they are on the supplementary agenda. There are items relating to minute 340. That was the land west of Station Road in Rainham. There's a conditional condition, and there were some informatives, 1 to 6. They're part of the minutes as well. Is that agreed? Excellent. Let's move on to item 3. I'm not aware of any urgent matters. Any? No? Declarations of interest. Councillor Sands.
Item 10, Chair. I am the Chair of Who Parish Council who have lodged an objection.
And you'll be leaving the room for that item?
I will, sir.
Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. My standard declaration that I attend parish council meetings, but I do not involve myself with any of their planning matters, so I can attend here. Thank you.
Okay. So I see Councillor Price get into the room, and he's entered in time. So we're going to move on to item 5, which is the Hawthorns, Matt Hill Road, Rainham, and Aaron is going to speak to the item.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for a retrospective change of use of the land to allow for the temporary siting of a caravan for a residential occupation for 3 years. So this slide shows a site plan. That's not... Okay, it's a different one to a... Sorry, that's right. There we go. Sorry, apologies. So this slide shows a site plan and an area view of the site. The site is located in Rainham South East Ward and is located to the south of the M2 and north of Mats Hill Road, and is located within the strategic gap, the North Kent Downs area of outstanding natural beauty, and the Mats Hill farmland character area of the Medway landscape character assessment. The map shows the proposed site in red. Alongside this, there's a granted 2015 residential curtilage in green, which was granted but sought to contain the residential development to the curtilage area outlined in green, and then the wider site in the ownership of the owner is in blue. The following slide shows a zoomed in. As you can see, the caravan is in the red area, is located outside of the previously granted green residential curtilage area. Slide 3, this slide shows views looking north towards the site from Mats Hill Road and along the access road. The access arrangements from highways will remain unchanged. This slide shows views across the site showing the caravan in situ. In terms of the principle of the development, it's considered that the proposal would not contribute, conserve or enhance the natural environment and landscape as is required by the local plan policies B&E 25, 31, 32 and 33 and paragraphs 174 and 176 of the NPPF, and would instead diminish the open character of the area, which would be harmful to the character and appearance of the North Kent Downs area of outstanding natural beauty, the strategic gap, the Mats Hill farmland character area, and the countryside location. To conclude, the principle of the development is considered as unacceptable and the application is recommended for refusal.
Thank you. So the Ward Councillor, Councillor Hackwell, wishes to address the committee. Is it agreed? Before you start, Councillor, I need to set up the timer. So you have 5 minutes and I'll give you the 1 minute warning. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak at tonight's meeting of the Planning Committee. This is my first time speaking as a ward councillor, even though I've spent the last few years on the committee itself. So it may surprise you tonight that I'm going to speak in favour of this application this evening, as I believe in being fair and even-handed. For those of you that don't know Matshill Road, it lies south of Medway and runs from the M2 services towards Bredhurst in the borough of Maidstone. The road is semi-rural in nature and is just inside the Kent ANOB area, which actually borders the M2. Matshill Road mainly consists of chalet bungalows lying on reasonably large plots of land, and more recently several travellers' sites, some with planning permission and some without. Over the recent years, planning consent has been granted to many applications along this road, including a very large 5-bedroom mansion that was oversized to our policy, and a year or so later, additional planning for a quadruple garage and outbuildings to add to the oversized property was added. Other permissions have been granted, some temporary, some permanent, including some with personal permissions for mobile homes. So precedents have been set for the development in the ANOB, both of brick-built dwellings and mobile homes along this road, subject to the same constraints of the NPFF. The Hawthorns, as we've just discovered, is around 300 metres from the border with Maidstone, and is a rural dwelling consisting of 2 homes on a plot roughly around 15 acres, which can only be described as a private park laid predominantly to grass. None of the dwellings, including the one on the agenda this evening, are visible from any publicly accessible place, including the road, so the dwellings are only visible from the air. No letters of objection have been received from anybody, including the nearest neighbours. The application before you tonight is for a retrospective temporary planning permission for the siting of a mobile home, for the sole use of a very close young family member for a period up to 3 years. The reason it's retrospective is that the young family member found themselves in a situation of being made homeless, and immediate action was required to provide them a home. Planning permission was sought soon after to legalise the situation, but in all honesty, planning permission had not been applied for. The chance of discovery of having no planning permission would be very slim indeed due to the secluded nature of the site. This demonstrates the applicant's honesty and integrity by trying to do the right thing and err on the right side of the rules and regulations. The additional mobile home is situated about 50 metres from the other dwellings on this 15-acre park. This is to give the young family member a semblance of independence, whilst being close enough to be included in the family and get their life back on track. The young person that occupies the said mobile home has suffered from mental health problems, which ultimately led them to being made homeless. And so, being a caring family, the applicants have provided a temporary home to help them through a difficult period in their life. Temporary permission is sought for a period of up to 3 years to provide some stability in this young person's life, so plans can be made to restart their life, get back into employment, and eventually find accommodation elsewhere away from the family home, which is difficult enough for most young people at this time. The response from the Kent Downs Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, including in your papers this evening, states that should the council accept the principle, we would request temporary permission only is given, which is exactly what this application seeks to do in asking for temporary permission. As the members of the Planning Committee, they are often asked to consider harm to either the environment, street scene, or the local neighbourhood. This application, being non-permanent in nature, does no long-term lasting harm to any of those, indeed very little short-term harm. I ask you tonight to consider that in the grand scheme of things, what harm this temporary siting of a mobile home will do versus the potential good to the young person's life. The applicant has stated that after 3 years, this site will be returned to its original condition and become part of the parkland once again. Thank you for your time this evening, and I hope you agree with me that the right thing to do is allow this temporary application for a period of up to 3 years to allow this private family the time they need to help the young member of their family back on the right path of life. Thank you.
Any member, sorry. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman, and I think I've been swayed by the information coming forward from the ward councillor. So there's a couple of things I think needs to be said in terms of the family themselves. They've taken on the responsibility of this young man. They haven't dumped him on the council to find either accommodation or homing for him in the long term. So I think it's quite feasible that we can re-look at this application. Now, the officers have put forward a refusal for 3 years. So, Chairman, can I suggest that we consider a temporary one of a year and then for it to be reviewed? Thank you.
Any other member? Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Chair. We've had a number of applications in this area, as the board member said, over the years for the siting of caravans, and we've treated those with sympathy. I'm a little bit surprised that we are not prepared to treat this one with sympathy. If the ward member is correct, and I've got no reason to believe he is not, if this current mobile home is not visible from the public highway, footpaths or anything else that is hidden behind tree cover, I do struggle to accept that this is going to do demonstrable harm to the environment of the area of outstanding natural beauty. So whilst in normal circumstances when areas of outstanding natural beauty are at risk, I would be quite vociferous in their defence, because we haven't got many of those here in Medway, and what we have got, I think we've got to make sure that we preserve. But if this is not visible, I think that argument falls, and the social aspects then outweigh any other harm or consideration that could be. So had this been in a visible spot, I certainly may have taken a completely different stance. But if it is, as we've been assured this evening, that it's not is totally invisible from any public area that could be viewed from, I just can't see what harm is being caused. So I would certainly be prepared to support allowing for, it's been suggested 1 year, but I'd be quite happy to support it for a 3-year temporary use. Thank you, Chair.
We have technical issues. Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your contribution as ward councillor. I'd like to ask the committee what's changed in planning terms from the refusals, if they were lawful and fair in the past. What's changed under planning? I understand the social issues, but so that's my question to the committee and probably to the officers, actually.
Can we go just put the meeting on hold for a while? We need to. Our wonderful system, our wonderful computers are rebooting. Of course, it happens to us all the time. So I'll come back to you, Hazel, and if you just re-ask that question, because Dave didn't hear it. Mr.
So
Harris?
the issue with this application is, obviously it's outside of the green curtilage, which was granted in the 2015. I did advise the applicant that they could move the caravan inside the granted curtilage and that would be acceptable, but I understood the caravan was not suitable due to its size, but another caravan could be sited within that curtilage and that may have been acceptable. But in its current location, it's deemed as not being acceptable.
Mr. Harris?
Chairman, thank you very much. Just coming back on all three councillors' points, and I want to be fair to Councillor Hackwell, who's spoken very well. Councillor Hackwell hasn't said that the policies have changed. What he's advised is the personal circumstances, in his view, should be a consideration in this instance. In that respect, I don't believe Councillor Hackwell is saying that a general caravan should be sited here. What he's saying is, in this instance, a temporary permission based on the personal circumstances should be granted. Now, from an officer point of view, Aaron has explained it very well in terms of the planning policy terms. In relation to Councillor Galvin's point in terms of, is it visible? No, I think Councillor Hackwell accurately described the site. I think he's right. I think the difference in terms of what's happened elsewhere along there in other caravans is this is not for a traveller, while the other ones that have been allowed, personal and temporary, and some permanent, have related to traveller uses. Well, this is not a traveller use. If members are minded to approve it, and Councillor Etheridge has suggested a 1-year temporary permission, I would also suggest to members that they impose a personal permission on this, because if members go against officer recommendation, they should only do so reflecting on the personal circumstances, because as I said, I think Aaron has quite rightly pointed out the planning presumption against development here. We would not be allowing general caravan uses on this site or anywhere else there. As Aaron has said, we would prefer the caravan to be clustered closer to the green, and then you've got that cluster of buildings, including the Dunningstone farm next door. So from a visual point of view, from a how it would appear, that would be our preference. So hopefully that's answered your question, Councillor Brown, in terms of there's not been a policy change. It is, and Councillor Hackwell is not arguing that there's a policy change, it's the personal circumstances here. Councillor Galvin, hopefully I've explained in terms of the visual side and the difference between this and the other caravans. And if members can consider, if you want to grant a consent, it needs to be personal, in my view. Thank you.
Can I just come back for a point of clarification? Are we deciding on the 3 years? There's a few things here. Firstly, we're deciding on the siting of the caravan. Secondly, we look like we're looking on temporary. And are we looking at the 1 year, or are we looking at 3 years? So I think we need to formally decide what we're trying to decide here. I'm just trying to eke it out in my own mind. So sorry if it sounds like silly old woman in the corner, but.
So, Councillor Brown, I would be asking the Vice Chair to move the recommendation as laid out. If that's not given adequate support, then we go to an alternative decision. Councillor Peake, sorry. Eddie, yeah? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm finding it hard to hear you, actually. Sorry. You know, mental health is my day job. I'm very compassionate as well as passionate about the importance of mental health and therefore well-being. But if I understand correctly, when you're on planning, you're not actually allowed to consider that. It's a very techno approach. You have to keep to the policies. In effect, your hands are tied by having to follow those policies, and personal considerations not something that we can consider. Could you confirm that, please? And my second question is, in your opinion, because obviously you can only guess, but if we were to allow this, the possible danger of setting a precedent, as we all know, if you go to appeal, if somebody can go, but you allowed it for the other one, why aren't you allowing it for me, can be a very hard argument then to win. Thank you.
Mr. Harris?
Chairman, thank you very much. And the legal officer may want to come in on that, whether personal circumstances are a material planning consideration. They rarely are, And the reason there rarely are is because normally someone was saying, well, I need that extension to the house for that reason, or I need this house for that reason. And the physical development then lasts longer than the personal circumstances. So that's why one of the reasons why personal circumstances are rarely relevant. There are times when they are relevant. When we talk about travellers, that's the personal circumstances, that's a personal choice. So it is a material consideration. We just feel that in this instance it carries less weight than the clear policy harm associated with this. I don't know whether Joe wants to add anything to that. No. No.
No, I don't need to add anything. I don't think that's...
They didn't hear.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just confirming that Dave's covered it and I don't need to add anything unless you've got any further...
We often get that thrown at us, Councillor Peake, and allegedly there's no such thing as a precedent. Each case is treated on its merits. But obviously, inspectors will say, well, okay, what's different between that one and this one? But the simple answer is every application on its merits. So and that's what members should consider here. And it is the weight that you attach to the personal circumstances here, and how much weight you attach to them, whether you go for a temporary permission or you go for a refusal. That's all your individual consideration here.
Councillor Jones?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and I genuinely sympathise with the individual circumstances in this case, but feel that we must be judging the matter on planning grounds. When we were discussing appeals a couple of meetings ago, we were quite firmly advised that we couldn't consider the costs of appeals in conjunction with our decision on the rationale of a planning application. And the same applies here. I don't believe we can discuss or consider these financial matters or whether somebody might be supported or might not be supported if this application was turned down. I think that what we've got to do, and we've had various proposals as to extension due to personal circumstance, but I think what we've got to do is to put the refusal, as you say, Chair, to the committee and test that, because that is the officer recommendation and that is based on planning grounds. I might add that I think it's a strange argument. I can understand why the ward members put this argument forward, but I think it's a strange argument to say such and such a building wouldn't be noticed, and if the applicant hadn't put in a planning application, nobody would have known. I don't think we should be advocating our planning and enforcement policies on that basis. So all in all, Chair, I shall still be moving refusal for the application. Thank you.
Councillor Hamadoshi.
Thank you. This is a rather difficult one for me because, like my colleague, mental health is something I've been working in for the last 20 years, and I don't use mental health lightly at all. If we're going to be approaching for any recommendation that sits outside of the initial recommendation with scant information, because using umbrella terms such as mental health with no detail does not allow anybody to get a sense of how unwell the individual is. It's just mental health. What does that mean? It's disrespectful to people that go through such trauma. So I too am troubled in that regard. Also in the fact that the proposal, the caravan could be situated, if I'm quoting Dave Harris correctly, in an environment that is more green, more visually pleasing, if I heard correctly, and okay, fine, but I'll continue. And all these things do improve your mental well-being. They certainly do. So I'm more swayed to be moving to refuse on those bases. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Just out of interest, really, the planning history from 1996, is this all from the same applicant, or has there been various people, you know, occupying that site?
Are we aware?
Chairman, I'm going to show my age here. I remember the 1996 application, and it's not the same applicant.
Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. Back to the personalisation issue. I well remember over quite a number of years, we have readily granted planning permission, temporary planning permission, for granny annexes. There was in fact one in my own ward in Robin Hood Lane, and I think that it was there for 15 years or more, and we were quite happy as a local planning authority to renew that every 3 years or so until the person who was resident in that caravan passed away. So the building that I well remember in Robin Hood Lane was not dissimilar to the one that was on that screen. It was pretty, you know, a white standard box, basically. So I do think we are being unduly harsh on this particular application, because we've allowed granny annexes on a temporary basis. This has just been asked for on a temporary basis, and all of a sudden, just because it happens to be in a nice country area, not in a dense urban area like Walderslade, we're treating it differently, and I don't think that is right. And if it can't be seen from the public highway, footpaths or anything else, I can't see what demonstrable harm we are doing to that area. And that is the planning reason for turning this down, that it would do demonstrable harm to an area of outstanding natural. If that area is not visible, unless you are trespassing, in planning terms, I think we could perfectly well accept this temporary application. And I think it would be the correct thing to do. Thank you.
Any other member? Okay. Councillor Manderis.
So it's just a quick question about moving the caravan within the, I've forgotten the words that you used, but within the green bit. If that, when you say it's too big, is that because of the two caravans that are there? Because I don't know, I don't have caravans, I don't know how easy they are to move, but it does seem like they could just be shifted forward and then...
So from my understanding from the site visits, the two caravans that are there are more like permanent kind of static homes, more like a chalet home. So the caravan that is sited there, I think it potentially may not fit within that residential curtilage granted in 2015, but a smaller caravan would fit in there, and then that would be acceptable. This is what was advised to the applicant, but the applicant chose to continue on the current application as is.
Any other member? Before I go to the Vice Chair, for me, there are two things. This is in an application in an area of outstanding natural beauty, which I think is something that we should be looking to protect. But on the domestic front, if the caravan could be located within the green curtilage, which has been granted in 2015, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's the way forward. I think that that this is pushing the envelope beyond. I think that we should be looking to support refusal. That's my point of view. Okay, so I'm going to go to the Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to move refusal on the grounds set out by the officers in the report.
Just say it. Yeah.
Second.
Just a reminder, this is the proposal is for refusal. Those in favour of the refusal.
That's 8, Chairman.
Those against?
That's 5, Chair.
Thank you, members. So the application for Mats Hill Road in Rainham has been refused. Thank you, Councillor, for attending. We'll move on to item 6, and Chantal will speak to it.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's fine. Good evening, members. This application is for 5 High Bank. It is a retrospective change of use from C3 dwelling to C2 care home. This is the site location plan here. It's being very temperamental. Going on to the site plan here, just shows the location within High Bank. The road to the left of the site is St William's Way for reference, and in the aerial image you can see the location of the property as well as the surrounding residential properties and the Wisdom Hospice located at the top of that aerial image there. Going on to the photographs of the site, it's a detached property with parking to the front. As you can see, these are just some images of the street view. The left image, you can see the Wisdom Hospice in that far corner there, and just the arrangement of the other residential properties within the street. Going on to the elevations, as you can see, it's a 2-storey detached property. There's no internal or external alterations proposed on this application. And that brings us to the floor plans. At ground floor, there is a study with an ensuite, lounge, cloakroom, open plan kitchen, dining area, and at first floor, the former bedrooms are used as a sensory room, staff office, dressing room, and the bedroom for the occupant, together with a family bathroom. The floor plan also demonstrates the 2 off-road parking spaces that are provided at the site. So, as I said, the permission seeks to change the use to facilitate a care home. It will be for 1 occupant who is cared for by 2 members of staff on a shift basis, together with 1 manager on site during the day. So that would result in 3 members of staff on site at any one time. As stated, there's no internal or external alterations. As such, it's not considered the proposal would cause harm to the appearance of the street scene. And in terms of occupant amenity, the occupant would have access to the shared spaces, including the lounge, kitchen and dining room, and the bedroom for the occupant would exceed minimum standards within the technical housing standards, so there's no concern in terms of occupant amenity. In relation to neighbouring amenity, the site is a detached dwelling. There's sufficient car parking and amenity space for the proposed use. So it's not considered that the comings and goings or noise associated with the property will be above and beyond that of a residential family dwelling, and as such the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Osborne wishes to address the committee as a ward member. Is that agreed? So you have 5 minutes, Councillor Osborne. You can start.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am requesting that the committee reject this retrospective application for change of use. I just firstly want to thank all of the numerous residents who are here tonight attending, who live on and work in the area as well. They have made their views clear on successive planning applications in rejection of this. I'll cut straight to the chase. There are a number of policies here which this application goes against. First of all, policy BNE1, which states that the landscape and urban design must be accurate. There are numerous inaccuracies in this architect's designs, including missing windows and doors, and as such, that architectural misdesign in these submissions, in my view, is a material problem that must be considered when you are giving permission. Second of all, policy H8 states that there must not be infringement upon the local amenities in the area. Many of the residents who are sat here, and it is my belief as well, believe that there are infringements on amenities. And policy T13 and T22 suggests and states that Medway Council must have disabilities, must be taken fully into account when considering these applications. This is a retrospective application, so it does raise serious questions why, if this was a serious individual, why an application wasn't made in the normal route. I'm going to go through why some of these areas of concern. So on page 4, it states that the loss of existing residential accommodation would not be permitted unless the proposal would provide facilities of significant benefit to the immediate local community. This site presents no immediate benefit to the local community and is not used by Medway Council in any capacity. It states that parking is adequate for staff, and we've heard tonight that that is the case. It is, and we actually are able to look at this today. There are at least 3 cars there on a 1 or 2 car drive. So there is insufficient space for parking. And on occasions, it has been noted there are 6 cars on premises. There are also significant amenities that will be of concerns. Direct light and noise pollution, parking issues have been raised previously, and in addition to that, concerns around the site suitability for a vulnerable adult or other adults or child in location. On page 6, it refers to shift patterns of between 8 in the morning and 8 in the evening. However, we know that those shift patterns are not entirely accurate, and we know that doors banging and noise levels from radios as well have been heard in surrounding sites, and these have been indicated with complaints. It states that there are no internal alterations. However, there are extensive alterations made in October 2022 in preparation for this care home, including installing an ensuite into the garage room, which is now used as a bedroom for permanent staff. So again, the applicant has not presented an accurate portrayal of what has occurred in this location. And that concern with inaccurate application, concern around amenities, breaching our high standards around urban landscape design and accuracy of submissions to this body, and in addition, my concern around disability access in the surrounding premises would lead me to conclude that at the very least this should be looked at again and resubmitted with accurate proposals for this committee to consider. And on that basis that this is not an accurate proposal, I would recommend to this committee that it be rejected and it submitted in a more accurate way. And also, just lastly, I do believe that the regulatory environment has changed in this regard around Ofsted. And if this is considered and passed this evening, I would strongly recommend that Ofsted be submitted documentation for an immediate review of this location so that it can be deemed adequate or inadequate for provision for this type of care home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Okay, so Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne, for come to speak to us. It concerns me, however, that there seems to be quite a contradiction from what apparently reality is and what the report says, because obviously when we read the report, we need to better trust it. If he says there's adequate parking, we need to believe and know there is adequate parking. So I don't know what can be said about that. Secondly, as someone who's worked in a care home, cannot overemphasize the importance that the internal structure, that the right fixtures are in place to make it a safe environment for whoever's given the care and obviously for the person being cared for. So I'm concerned also, as Councillor Osborne said, that this needs to come back with an accurate description and the right request, if you like, as in, I'm not sure I've got the right language, as in, I now have a home and I've taken these actions and now this home is adequate. Thank you.
Chantal?
On
Yeah.
the parking, there is 2 parking spaces provided on site, so they would be able to park 2 cars there. With this scheme, it's proposed that there'd be 3 members of staff at any given time, so 2 of those can park on the driveway, and it's not considered that 1 additional car within the street would cause detrimental harm to the highways network. The sort of areas used as parking for the Wisdom Hospice, so there are other people using that street, so it's not considered that that would be significantly detrimental to the parking provisions within that area. And just on your second point, the current occupant does not have any physical disability, so they've not had to make any alterations to facilitate that occupant being there.
Well, Councillor Lettitoff.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate the position of my colleague, Councillor Peake. If the applicant has made the application and there has been misrepresentation there, can we just defer it till we make sure that that we have all the information we need to make a decision?
So Dave, I think I'm not quite sure what further information you wanted.
I think that was going to be my question, Chairman. This is for a change of use of the dwelling. There are no external alterations proposed. Chantal has explained what the application's for. I'm not sure what a deferral will gain, Chairman.
I know Councillor Peake is his first time of seeing this type of application. So this is a dwelling house, and it's going to be a dwelling house. So the occupation of a dwelling house will be pretty well identical to it running as a home. So you imagine a family with 1 child, or 3 cars, or 4 cars, whatever. So you have to be. We're comparing dwelling house with dwelling house. Any other member? Councillor Galvin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm completely lost on what planning grounds we could possibly turn this down. As you've quite rightfully mentioned, Chair, a family home of this size could quite easily have 4 or more cars attached to it. Certainly in my own area, in a 3-bedroom semi, there was one that at one time there were 6 vehicles attached to that and only 1 off-road parking space. So I think the argument about the parking is quite frankly ridiculous. And the reality is that nationally we have not got enough homes of this nature to look after young people with severe challenges. And obviously, given the level of staffing, this young person must have quite severe challenges to warrant that 24-hour care. And certainly, as a local authority, I think it's, as well as being a planning authority, and particularly as a planning authority, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we have sufficient provision for young people that need this sort of care in the community. So, I will certainly be supporting this. I am quite happy to support this. We need more of these homes in the community, not less. We're crying out, to provide this sort of provision. It is necessary, and I think we should be wholeheartedly supporting this because it's good for our community to provide these facilities because we have lots of young people within our community that desperately need this level of accommodation and care. So I will be quite happily supporting this. Thank you, Chair.
It was mentioned about the change of a garage to a habitable room. If you look at the planning history, that was a planning application from 2015, which was approved at the beginning of 2016, long before the proposal for this home to be used, this house to be used as a care home. So permission has already been granted correctly. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the update regarding the garage. It is useful to have the facts in front of us. Every time I come to sub on this committee, there is another application for a C3 to a C2. And the ward councillor is quite correct. That's probably driven, well actually it is driven, by the requirement for these places to be now regulated by Ofsted since the 28th of October. And that's why we are getting this rush of applications. We've had them in my own ward before the 28th of October, well before actually the 3rd of May. So on planning grounds, I can't see that we have a choice. On planning grounds, I think we have to support the application. It is a change of use, and as the chairman said, it is also a dwelling house. The family makeup isn't a family in the sense of a mum, a dad, you know, blood relative family, but it's supposedly done in this environment to provide a family setup as near as possible for the vulnerable person who's living here. I don't know whether it's a child or an adult, but it's a vulnerable person. And I don't think we have a choice here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamadishi.
To echo my colleague, it's very, very difficult, and one cannot approach this through just the planning's eyes per se, because changing the dwelling, obviously, to look after a young person in need can also conjure up negative thoughts, because these types of conversions have a negative reputation, particularly within the area that we are in. Too many of them take on very high risk, very needy young people that sometimes 2-to-1 turns to 3-to-1. Sometimes 3-to-1 turns to 4-to-1. I've seen it happen too many times. So from a planning perspective solely, I cannot see how we can do anything but support it. However, I think we should be focused on making sure that the CQC really investigate and get a lid on these types of properties and make sure that the right controls are in place so that not only the young people feel welcomed and looked after and supported in a family environment, but also the neighborhood, because this young person is not a slave or a cave, not living in a cave dwelling. He or she will have to go out for walks. And the neighbors are going to be in the vicinity. So for social cohesion, it's so important that we look about harmonizing young people in our communities, on our streets. But certainly from a planning perspective, I cannot see how we can stop this one from going through.
Thank you. Just to say that I will be, as I said, this is, on planning terms alone, we're considering this. Ofsted makes the decision whether to grant it a licence as a care home, not the planning committee. So, Councillor Anton.
Well, thank you, Chair. I think from the report, they said Kent Police have been consulted and have requested that crime prevention measures are secured. So I just want to find out of the planning permission that they are asking for, have they taken that into consideration for securing crime prevention within the building, as suggested by the Kent Police?
Remember, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I was going to ask exactly the same question because Councillor Osborne's eloquent, and I don't mean that in any patronising way, his eloquent representations on behalf of his residents led me to take another look at the report. And I wasn't sure whether the Kent Police views had been taken into account in the condition regarding design. And perhaps I can have assurances from the officers on that. I agree with what all four councillors who spoke before me have said about the planning aspects of this and looking at it entirely as a planning matter. I don't myself, and I'm prepared to take legal guidance on this or whatever is necessary, Chair, I don't myself see any difficulty with Councillor Osborne's request that all the paperwork that's being considered here be submitted to Ofsted. But, you know, if there's any legal reason why that shouldn't be the case, then obviously, you know, I'll be guided by the officers. But just one question to the officers in terms of the Kent Police measures. Thank you.
The Kent Police measures are added as an informative because it's not legislation that we can enforce. We can't put it on as a condition, but it is on the informatives.
Okay. Any other member? If not, I'll move to the Vice Chair to move the recommendation as laid out in the agenda papers.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendations approval with conditions 1 to 3 as set out in the report.
Second, thank you. Those in favour of the proposal?
That's 14, Chair.
The application for 5 Highbank Road, Highbank, Rochester has been approved, but just in saying that, I need to just say the following, which I say it every time we move this type of, or approve this type of planning application. This approval is only in planning terms. The Planning Committee has not given permission for the Children's Care Home. That permission is granted by Ofsted, working with the Children's Services Department of the local authority whose children will be living there, which may not be Medway Council. And I request on behalf of the committee that the concerns raised by residents and others be made available to Ofsted. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Osborne, for attending. And thank you, members of the public, for attending. Okay. Excellent. We'll move on to item 7, 25 St George's Road, and it's Peter. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. This application relates to 25 St George's Road in Gillingham. Again, the proposal is similar to the last application in that it's retrospective and for the change of use from C3 to C2 for use as a care facility, care home. The proposal for this application site is for 2 occupants of the property, with again 2 carers that are on shift patterns. You can see from the slide that's up there you've got with the aerial photograph. It's the end of terrace property, as I said, within Gillingham, quite close to the Medway Park sports facility, and about half a mile from the Gillingham train station. The proposal doesn't include any external changes to the property, so there's no extensions or no additional windows going in. So in that regard, impacts of privacy or light would be unaffected. There's no car parking on site at the moment, and there's none proposed as part of this application. Those that are familiar with the site, obviously know the area and the fact that it's generally terrace properties with on-street car parking in that area. The main issues that have been raised by objectors are those on parking and noise, as well as potential for antisocial behaviour. As members are clearly aware from the discussion on the last application, that in terms of planning merits and planning considerations, it's this decision sort of falls to those matters rather than the wider matters which are covered by the Ofsted requirements. So in terms of the proposal, it complies with the policies as set out in the report. The parking area, or the parking is controlled within one of the council's controlled parking zones. So any visitors in terms of workers and carers on the shift pattern will have to abide by those requirements. But as I said, it's close to the train station and bus services, so it's in a very sustainable location for alternative modes of transport to go to their place of work for the carers. And really, there's not a great deal to add to that, really. The recommendation is for approval with a condition that limits the number of occupants to 2 occupants. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Price wishes to speak as a ward member. Is it agreed? You have 5 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. I just want to make it clear, first of all, that I am speaking purely as a ward member. Members will know that I'm a lead member for Children's Services, but I'm not wearing that hat on this item. And after I've spoken as ward councillor on behalf of the residents, I will absent myself from the meeting and not take part in any of the discussion or the voting, etc. First of all, just to say that the officer did summarise the negative impact which has been raised by the residents, but he didn't raise one particularly important point which the residents have raised is that there are already 2 other properties with the C2 use in the immediate area in that same road. St George's Road is a road of terraced housing. So this retrospective application is for property number 25. Its properties number 46 and 31 are already operating as children's care homes in that area. Further to that, because of the proximity to Mid-Kent College and also the universities, there's a lot of student housing in the area as well, and many of the residents have been part of a pact which managed to influence students to respect the local residential nature of the neighbourhood. But anyway, I'll just get back to this point first of all. Noise has been mentioned, and just to give you some illustration of that, there is frequently, in connection with the 2 properties and the fact that this is retrospective with this one as well, frequently swearing, shouting, screaming, also youngsters hanging around on the street corners, riding bikes around noisily, and the other aspect which relates to noise is that there has been particular looked after children in there have been in the habit of thumping the wall, and residents have felt the vibrations through the brick walls 2 houses away, just to give some illustration. And I've been sent noise recordings to be able to prove that. In relation to parking, there are meant to be 2 people that will be looked after there at any one time. There'll be staffing supporting those 2, so that's another 2 members of staff. Plus, there's the handover time when the one shift finishes and the next shift starts. So that's the potential for up to 6 spaces at that time. like I say, there is residence parking, and there have been occasions when an agency worker has arrived for shift and has knocked on the doors of neighbours to ask if they can have the daily parking permit in order for them to be able to park. So it just goes to show, parking is at a premium, and residents who need to go out as part of their amenity living in the area, if they arrive back after 9 p.m, they have to park a long away from the immediate street where they live. So I've mentioned the impact of parking, noise impact, and the fear that this is going to result in antisocial behaviour. Because the staff aren't residents at the actual property, they don't treat it the same way as they would if they were living in their own road. And there are practices such as hanging of washing over fences, etc., whereas normally people would be looking after their washing, like a bit better.
1 minute.
Okay, so just wanted to say that the residents wanted me to be able to convey these this experience which they've had. Obviously, they want the cared-for children to be looked after properly. They can see the need for this, but I'm pointing out, and I hope there is a planning condition for this, that there is already saturation of this type of use in that road. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Here we go, yet another one. The one thing I'd ask the committee to just note, and maybe we could actually ask for this to be noted to Ofsted again, and that's Kent Police. The report here says they've been consulted on the application, but I doubt if they'd been advised that this is yet another street with more than 2 C2 houses in it. Kent Police have had concerns about previous ones in Gillingham, whereby they are worried that the children are being groomed for county lines. We've had reports of fights in the street, we've had evidence of fights in the street, and there is nothing about this in the Kent Police statement in this report. So I would just ask that when it comes to the licensing and when it comes to the information being provided to Ofsted as the licensing authority for this, that they are made aware of the potential and the concerns of, and actually that they're instructed to contact Kent Police about the evidence that I am referring to. Again, on planning grounds, I can't see any reason we can't allow this.
Any other member? Councillor Hamadashi.
Thank you very much. I too echo my colleague in most part of this one. This cottage industry is really starting to grate. How many of these homes do we have on that street? What?
Yeah, put your microphone on.
It's on. Oh, okay. Sorry. I do this. Don't be so shy. Okay. In terms of how many properties have been changed for this purpose on the street is a concern, and I think that needs to be put into some sort of consideration as well as parking. But yeah, from the planning perspective, I think it's a very difficult one to challenge. But again, as my colleague rightfully said, during handover periods of time, there's going to be excessive demand for parking on that street. And there's no way of getting around that. Yes, there's transport links, but that area is very congested. And the cross-fertilization between vulnerable young people in close proximity with each other does make them vulnerable and susceptible to county lines, and also sharing bad practice as well. So I'm troubled with this one.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Banderas.
I would also echo lots of things that have already been said, and I'm equally troubled around putting vulnerable young people so close to other homes. But I would also say that we've approved lots of these not knowing anything about the companies, because we just get what we get and we get the planning things. On this, we do actually have the report from Children's Services that say that this company generally go above and beyond. And the other side where I'm troubled and like conflicted on it is I'm loath to reject something from a company that seem decent from all the info that we've got, whereas otherwise we're approving them for ones that we don't know anything about.
Yeah, so when we had some of these much earlier on, one of the things we didn't have is any report from our Children's Services commissioning team, and they have made comment upon this, and they are extremely supportive. Councillor Peake.
Well, again, I'm getting my head around about the fact that this is a planning meeting, and no matter how annoying, inconsiderate behaviour by neighbours is, and how you might want to do something about that, that in itself is not a planning consideration, I would not have thought. The possibility of having people there who may or may not behave like this and may or may not always keep on living there, in itself I would not have thought is an actual planning consideration. But obviously, as always, I'm ready to be contradicted by an officer if need be. Thank you.
Any other member? Councillor Anton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think representation from the Children's Commission have been consulted, and basically they are in support. They are supportive of it. So taking, if we look at the planning consideration, where it's fit for purpose, and then with the support, because with most of it, members will be asking of whether Ofsted will be approve of it or not. So if this time the Children's Commission is in support of it, I don't see the reason why members should not be willing to approve this permission.
Thank you. Any other member? If not, I'm going to move to the Vice Chair to move the recommendation as laid out in the papers.
Thank you, Chair, and I also think it was helpful that Councillor Price clarified the capacity in which he was attending. We've had 2 or 3 portfolio holders speak at the last couple of meetings, and it's useful to have clarity that they are speaking as ward members, as that is what you always introduce them as, Chair. So moving to the report, I move approval with conditions, recommendations, conditions 1 and 2, as I say, moving approval.
Those in favour of the proposal?
That's 14, Chair.
I think it's everybody. Okay, so the planning application for 25 St George's Road, Gillingham is approved, and I'm going to do it again. I'm going to read out. This approval is only in planning terms. The Planning Committee has not given permission for the Children's Care Home. That permission is granted by Ofsted, working with the Children's Services Department of the local authority whose children will be living there, which may not be Medway Council. And I request on behalf of the committee that the concerns raised by residents and others, be made available to Ofsted. Thank you. So move to item 8. Sorry. Those who wish to have a comfort break, we're going to break for a comfort break. there will be another comfort break after item 10. And so let's move on to item, what is it? 8. And Madeleine.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for 32 Tennyson Road in Gillingham, and it's for the construction of a single-storey rear and side extension, a dormer to the rear and roof lights to the front. And this is to facilitate the change of use from a dwelling to a 7-person house in multiple occupation. This is a site location plan, with the site outlined in red. The property is within the urban area of Gillingham. Oh, too fast. This is the aerial view with the site outlined in red. This is not a predominantly mixed-use area, but there is another small HMO at the end of this road, and there are also 2 other HMOs in surrounding roads, and a retail shop and a takeaway in an adjacent road. It's the front elevation of the property, which is a terrace. And this is the rear elevation of the property. As you can see, they've got scaffolding already erected. So the reason for this is in July of this year, an application for a lawful development certificate was submitted, and this was for the insertion of a dormer to the rear, a rear extension and a side extension to facilitate the use as a 6-person house, small house in multiple occupation. And this lawful development certificate application was approved, so them works they can do under their permitted development rights. They're being included in this application because at the time of the application, them elements hadn't been put in place, so they are being considered within this application. So this is the existing and the proposed floor layout. And what you've got is 2 bedrooms within the loft, 3 bedrooms at first floor level, and 2 bedrooms at ground floor level. You've got a kitchen, lounge and diner. And, sorry, it's really hard to see on these plans, but the difference between the floor layout of this to what was allowed under their permitted development rights is there's a living room to the front in the lawful development, and that would be changed to a further bedroom. So that's the only difference to the lawful development certificate application. These are the existing and proposed rear elevations. So you've got roof lights to the front, you've got a large dormer to the rear, and you've got single-storey extensions, one's to the rear and one's to the side of the 2-storey addition. And these are the side elevations, which show the dormer. And as previously said, that can be erected under the lawful development certificate application. So we considered that the extensions are modest, acceptable in design. The dormer, on balance, is acceptable in consideration what can be constructed under permitted development rights. We don't consider it to have a detrimental impact on neighbouring amenity, and no highways impact subject to a condition for a parking management plan to try and restrict them gaining access to parking permits. So the application is set out in the report and recommended for approval, but what we're looking for is a resolution to approve subject to the SAM's bird mitigation being paid. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This application is actually very similar to one that came to the committee 4 weeks ago, which is actually in West Road in my ward. It's near identical in the sense of 6 to come 7 after lawful development. Any member? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. On reflection, I don't think I can support this. I think the owner is becoming rather greedy, changing it from what was already approved for 6 to 7, basically by removing a community area for the other 6, which I think is rather outrageous. But even more importantly, I always thought, and I stand to be corrected, HMOs in this condition of additional accommodation in the roof required a fire certificate or a fire escape, and I don't seem to see anything in the conditions regarding that. So if that can be clarified as well, I'd be extremely grateful. Thank you.
Madeline?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, we've never had an application that needed a fire escape for a dormer window.
Any other member? Okay. Councillor Nasdorf?
Thank you, Chair. I notice on page 43 that Southern Water has advised that the development will extend over one of these sewers, and I know it's usually not permitted to build over sewers, because if they get clogged, there's no way to unclog them. So, and I see the recommendation is to approve, but if there is something that significant, why is the recommendation to approve?
Madeline?
Sorry, was that to do with building over a sewer? Yeah. Okay, so, I mean, that would be dealt with separately with Southern Water, but that would be for the single-storey extension, which could be constructed under permitted development rights anyway.
Any other member? Councillor Brown?
I'm a bit concerned about the loss of amenity within the household. Councillor Etheridge is right to draw to our attention, not that anybody missed it in the presentation, in fairness. Yeah, I feel if you've got permitted development for a six-bedder here, which is unfortunate really, because I think that's overdevelopment for what it is, but that's a personal opinion. I think doing away with that amenity inside to create an extra bedroom is grounds, as far as I was concerned, for us to reject it. Thank you.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's pretty identical to the one that we had in Western Road. Well, in fact, that's pretty identical to the one we had last time round, when there was a change of a room on the ground floor between 6 and 7. Any other member? Councillor Nestorff?
Thank you, Chair. I have just one more question. Looking at the plan, it looks like a very cramped appearance inside with only bedrooms, reiterating my colleague. I just wanted to know, are the bedrooms big enough to be woefully considered a bedroom?
Madeline?
Yes, so that all the bedrooms meet the National Described Space Standards that we use for bedroom sizes.
Councillor Field?
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification on it. I'm just looking at the plans and just some useful clarification from officers. In terms of individual rooms in a HMO, do they have to have private bathroom facilities? Because looking at the proposed layout on the first floor, so this is on page 27 of your presentation, 2 of the bedrooms don't appear to have private bathroom access. Is that allowed? Just to clarify.
Madeline?
Yes, they don't need their own bathrooms. It is shared accommodation. So the 2 in the roof have en suites, and then there's a further bathroom on the first floor and one on the ground floor.
Any other member? If not, I'm going to move to the Vice Chair to move the recommendation as laid out in the agenda paper.
That's precisely what I'm going to do, Chair. Move the recommendations as set out by the officer and in the report, conditions 1 to 6, moving approval with those conditions.
Chairman, thank you very much. Just to confirm what Madeline said, that we're asking for a resolution to approve because they haven't paid the bird payment. So if members are happy to resolve to approve once they've paid the bird payment, then we can issue the permission.
I move what the Chief Planning Officer just said, Chair.
Those in favour of the proposal?
That's 7, Chair.
Those against?
That's 5, Chair.
So the application for 32 Tennyson Road, Gillingham, has been approved. And we'll move on to item 9, which is Upper Bush Road, Cuxton, and Chantal is going to speak to this.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks to convert a disused barn to a 4-bedroom residential dwelling with garden space and parking provisions to front. This is the site here, located in Upper Bush. It is in close proximity to the existing hamlet, which is the conservation area of Upper Bush, which you can see on towards the southwest of the site. And you can also see Cuxton urban area is located northeast of the site as well. The site is also located within the North Downs area of outstanding beauty, which will be shown in the photograph slides shortly. So there was a previous permission for a similar scheme on this site, which was for the conversion of the barn to a 4-bedroom property. The difference between the previous permission and this application is the internal layout and the placement of windows within the facade. Going on to the photographs of the site, this is the front and rear of the existing barn. The silos that you can see in those photographs are to be removed as part of this application. The first image on the left just shows the barn in a wider context, and you can start to see the landscape behind it. The top right image is taken from Upper Bush Road. You can just about see the silos as it integrates quite well into the landscape, but it shows the relationship with the existing dwellings within the conservation area. And then the last photo on the bottom right is from Warren Road, looking up towards the existing barn, again demonstrating the relationship with the landscape. Going on to the elevations, demonstrates the proposed dwelling, which will be 2 stories, but it would retain the frame of the existing barn, and there's no further extensions proposed to the original structure. In comparison to the previous approval, there is a reduction in windows to rear, together with the introduction of large timber sliding doors. This is to minimise the residential appearance and light admittance into the AONB. The proposal also seeks to use tinted glass to further mitigate this. The materials proposed have not been submitted with this application. However, should the application be considered favourably, the materials would be secured by condition. Going on to the floor plans. The ground floor will be arranged as an entrance hall, open plan kitchen and dining area, utility room, living area, snug and study. The first floor will comprise of 4 bedrooms with 2 with en-suites and dressing room for the master, together with a family bathroom. It is considered that the reuse of a building for residential within the countryside is acceptable in principle, subject to the appearance and impact on the character of the surrounding countryside. In this case, it is not considered that the proposed conversion to residential would cause harm to the AONB or the surrounding conservation area, subject to the materials used. It's not considered that a residential property within the area would be out of character, taking into consideration the dwellings located approximately 20 metres from the proposal site. The proposal provides adequate parking and would meet with technical housing standards in terms of internal floor area. There is existing landscaping to rear to be retained, and this is to ensure that residential paraphernalia cannot be seen across the AONB. Therefore, subject to conditions, the application is recommended for approval.
Any member? Councillor Fern.
Yep, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chantel, for your presentation. So in 2018, there was planning consent, as you mentioned. At the time, they said it was a redundant agricultural barn, and you mentioned in your presentation just now it was a disused barn. Not quite accurate. Vineyard Farms have taken that land on, as you know, as you've been to the site. It is used. It is used area, and it's very, very heavily used now. There's a lot of agricultural vehicles using that site. There's a lot of staff coming and going. It's like a transfer station, and it's used on a daily basis. It's it's very, very busy up there now. As we heard in a previous application this evening, and Chair, you said yourself, all AONBs in Medway are, should be protected, and this it sits within that. And for me, although I think the design is good, the fact that it is in the OMB and Vineyard Farms are, again, they're going to try and progress their application for the vineyard and the facilities, again, that they're going to bring back to planning. I do have some concerns. Number one, light pollution. It's a very dark area, and I think that will have an impact by the light. Visual impact. There will be a visual impact. I mean, you showed in one of your slides that you can just about see the silos in the background, but there will be a visual impact there. But for me, so for those two reasons, and the fact that it's in the OMB, I will not be supporting this.
Thank you. I agree with your concerns, but the issue is the fact that we had a previous application agreed, not by the last committee, but the committee before, back in the beginning of 2019. Chantel.
Thank you, Chair. The AONB officer has said within her comments that the existing barn has no merit within the landscape, and she didn't necessarily object to it being converted to residential, but she did state that a reduction in the windows would be of benefit, and the applicant did engage in that, and they have reduced the amount of windows that was rear of the property.
Councillor Fern?
Just come back, Chair. Sorry, I appreciate that, but my concern is, like it was with the winery, is we start allowing this development in OMBs, it's just going to escalate, and we're going to get more and more, and it puts our precious OMBs at risk. So for me, it's, I can't support that.
Okay. Mr. Harris.
Chairman, I understand the Councillor Fern's points. Almost reiterating what Chantel has said, and yourself, Chairman, there is a previous approval for this. Secondly, I would say, if this was a new build, the recommendation would be different, and I would 100% agree with Councillor Fern, because of its impact on the OAMB, we would be refusing that. But this is a conversion of an existing building, and Chantel has explained the merits of that conversion, and Chairman, you've confirmed that there was a previous approval as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Nussdorf.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask, I couldn't find it here. Is the development gonna contribute positively for the biodiversity of the area?
So, sorry, Chair.
Yeah, Chantal, yeah.
Thank you. There is existing landscaping within the site, which is being retained for biodiversity measures. There's also conditions that relate to light, which may disturb birds, and that's been secured by condition to ensure that the external light doesn't impact the biodiversity of the birds within the area, the bats within the area, sorry.
Chairman, just in addition to that, draw members' attention to condition 10. Prior to first occupation, the development hereby approved an ecological enhancement plan formulated in line with the biodiversity opportunity area blah, 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 shall be submitted to and approved in writing with us. Thank you.
Calvin?
Thanks, Chairman. Whilst I fully understand my colleague Councillor Fern's concerns over building in areas of outstanding natural beauty, and I'm reassured by Mr Harris's comments about had this been a new build, it most certainly would have been turned down. I'm reassured by that. But the reality is that most agricultural buildings do not fit into their environment. It's an anomaly in the planning thing that farmers can put up anything in a beautiful area, but basically, and there's no control over that. You know, and that cost type crinkly shed that would probably be reasonably acceptable on an industrial estate, can be plonked down anywhere in the countryside. So whilst I do get my colleagues' concern, I actually think this is an improvement on what was there. You know, I think it will make a beautiful house. I only wish I could afford it, because it seemed to be, it would be a beautiful place to live. There is a balance in these things, but in my case, I think the balance is that we should go ahead with this. But I'm reassured by Mr Harris's assurance that had this been a new build, we wouldn't have allowed it, and I think that's the assurance we want. There's only a limited supply of these sheds that can be converted, you know, and I think we're probably getting near the end of that. But I would just like some reassurance from the officers that because it's difficult to judge from the drawings we've seen what the appearance of the materiality, and that is really crucial with this, of whether it will fit into its environment or not. So I'd just like some reassurance that officers are happy with the materiality and that the materials, the palette of materials, sort of will fit into the landscape.
Chantal?
Thank you, Chair. The materials have not been submitted with the application, so they will be dealt with under conditions application. Because it is within the conservation area, we'll need to liaise with the conservation officer on that as well to ensure that it fits within the conservation area and within the landscape.
Any other member? Yeah, AOMB is an important issue in this area, and we will undoubtedly be discussing it at greater length when the potential winery comes back. I'm going to move to the Vice Chair for moving the recommendation as laid out.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I so do. I move approval subject to conditions 1 to 17 of the report as set out.
Those in favour of the proposal?
That's 12, Chair.
Those against?
That's 3, Chair.
Thank you. The planning application for Keeper Barn, Upper Bush Road, Cuxton has been approved. And move on to item 10. And just now, Councillor Sands to go up to prayer. So Madeline is presenting this. Madeline.
Thank you, Chairman. This application's for 42 Chattenden Lane in Chattenden, and it's for the demolition of existing dwelling and construction of a terrace of 4 3-bedroom dwellings with associated landscaping and parking. This is the site location plan, just showing where the site outlined in red. This is the aerial view, so it shows the site outlined in red, and it also shows next to the site there's like a vehicular access that leads to one of the rear gardens of the properties. I think it's next door, and it also acts as like a footpath to the housing development behind. These are the existing photos, so this will be demolished. And these are just photos rear of the existing building and the footpath, vehicular access to the side. So in 2019, the Planning Committee approved an outline application for a terrace of 4 3-bedroom dwellings, and in 2021 a reserved matters application was submitted and approved under delegated powers, this application is identical to that which was approved under the reserved matters application. So this is the existing block plan and the proposed, which shows 2 car parking spaces to the front of each property and large gardens to the rear. Elevations showing the design of the terrace properties, and floor layout and roof plan just show where there's 3 bedrooms upstairs for the shared living accommodation downstairs. Policy H1 of the local plan allows minor development, and the principle of development has already been established through the granting of the previous applications for residential. The dwellings would all meet the space standard requirements, and they'd all be provided with 2 car parking spaces to meet the parking requirement standards. There's no detrimental impact on neighbouring amenity, and we consider design is acceptable in this location, which is a very mixed street scene of different dwelling types. The SAMS mitigation fee has been paid, and the application is considered acceptable as set out in the report and recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is as it says, a resubmission of a permission that's already been given relatively recently, and it's simply come to committee because of the concerns raised again by the parish council. Any member? Councillor Galvin.
Just a quick question. It looked like from the photographs that the present property is occupied. Is that the case?
Is it?
I don't know for definite, but I'd say it's likely to be occupied.
It just concerns me that we have got so many planning applications here in Medway that have not been built out. If it is the case that the property is not occupied, is unoccupied with planning permission, it just seems that if we keep renewing it like this, it's like playing a game, isn't it? They've increased the value of the land, but we're not seeing the benefit of it in our housing numbers. Is there anything that we can do to promote this along? I mean, 4 extra is not going to make that much difference. It's the general principle that we've got so many outstanding planning permissions that are not being built out. And the fact that we're not building is used as a lever against us at planning inquiries. So I feel a little bit of frustration with this sort of thing. Perhaps I'm not really getting anywhere with what I'm saying, but...
I'm equally frustrated that building's not happening, especially every time the nonsense that the government says, if you don't build to these numbers, we're going to penalise you, and it's a formula to always fail us. Councillor Harris. Oh, even upgrading you to Mr. Harris.
Chairman, thank you very much. Just a couple of things on that, because I understand exactly your frustration, Councillor Galvin. Firstly, the dwelling is occupied. I know that because I walk my dog past there most nights, so it is occupied. The other thing I would say is we have sent a list of all those permissions where we're struggling to get developers to complete them. We've sent them to the Small Medium Enterprise Forum and said, if you want to help us build, here's some sites that you should look at because these already have planning permission that you can build out. So hopefully there'll be some movement there. As you say, though, we can't force them to build at this moment in time. The Levelling Up Act, which has just become an act, might give us more powers, but we will see what happens in the secondary legislation next year.
Thank you. Any other member? If not, I'm going to move to the Vice Chair to move a recommendation.
Chair, thank you. I move approval with conditions 1 to 11 as set out in the report.
Thank you. Those in favour of the recommendation? Full House.
That's 14, Chair.
Excellent. Therefore, the planning application for 42 Chattenden Lane, Chattenden, has been approved. Okay, that's the end of the planning applications. I'm going to have a call a comfort break, and those who don't have to stay can go. Harris.
Chairman, thank you very much. Quarterly performance report. First thing I'd like to say, though, is my restructure is now settling in place, and I think that's demonstrated by tonight. I've got a new DM manager, development management manager, Peter, who's here tonight. Madeline's one of my new principals. She's been with me for a long time, fully deserves a promotion to the principal post. Aaron, who you saw tonight, was my derelict and empty properties officer. Got promotion to senior planner, doing exceptionally well, sponsoring him through university. And you've seen the quality of Chantel. So really pleased with that. That restructure was about retention of good staff, which we're doing, and also recruitment of excellent staff like Peter. So it's working. So that's good news. In terms,
excellent.
Yeah. In terms of the performance report, just quickly going through this, members, number of applications received and determined. You'll see, if I can get the mouse to work, that it's starting to decline there in terms of number of applications received, and that reflects the economic position we find ourselves in. Talking to developers, we think that things will start to pick up at some point in time next year, and we will start to receive more applications. It has enabled us to catch up, has enabled my new officers to settle in, but clearly from a financial point of view, I would like to see a few more applications coming in. We are judged in terms of our performance. There are government targets that we need to meet, and I'm pleased to see, and you can see here that the blue shows the government target, and the orange shows our performance in terms of applications which are not subject to extension of time, and the grey is those applications which are subject to an extension of time. So we are well above, in terms of major applications, applications for more than 10 houses, we're well above the government target. In relation to minor applications, again, you can see we are consistently above, significantly above the government target. And similarly with other applications, that's the householder applications, adverts and so on, again, significantly above government target. Application fees, that point I was saying here, that's the fees so far this year. Down on previous years, reflecting the number of applications. One thing I would say here is that the government are putting up the planning fees from the beginning of December quite significantly. About time, because what I would say is that up until now, the money we receive hasn't covered the costs of processing applications. So they have significantly put it up. They've also brought in measures that it will go up automatically in line with inflation every year, again, which is a good thing. So applications determined within the statutory time frame, I've talked through those. Where we're looking to go outside of that statutory time period, we will normally enter into a planning extension agreement because there must be good reasons for not processing it within the 8 or 13 weeks. So we would agree a planning extension agreement. That would normally be where we're looking to get improvements to the scheme, amendments to the scheme, or for it to come to committee. Now, in relation to appeals, you'll see the number of appeals that we have received. And these are the number of appeals allowed dismissed in the time period. So those are the appeals that we've dismissed, in line with our recommendation and members' decision. And they are the number of appeals that are allowed. We have an informal target of no more than 30% allowed. The reason we've got that informal target, because we do feel that if it's more than 30% allowed, then we need to look very carefully as to whether we're acting contrary to what is coming out of the government and what the planning inspectorate say. And there's a very important reason for that. In relation to appeals, if more than 10% of the applications you received are allowed an appeal, then the government can say, right, applicants, you can apply to the planning inspectorate rather than applying to Medway Council. Now, the consequence of that is we don't get the planning fee, we don't get a say in the decision. We still have to do a lot of the work, though. So that has significant consequences for us, and that's why it's important to have an eye on that target. Now, we're pretty good at the moment. In terms of major applications, we're at 1.6%, so we're a long way below the 10% mark there. And for non-major applications, we're at 1.1%. So again, a long way below the worry 10%. But we just need to keep an eye on it. Prior approvals, apologies members, I'm still very anti prior approvals for conversions of office buildings, etc. to residential without planning permission. Some are done quite well, some are done very, very poorly with a very poor level of amenity, but also we get no Section 106 agreements for prior approvals. That's a real concern to me and to members generally, because you've got those conversions, they're going to have an impact on local services and facilities, and we get no money to assist that. That can't be right in my view. So I will continue, members, I will continue to lobby the government to change this. Number of units under construction. Councillor Golvin has talked about the government targets. Our target set using the standard methodology is currently 1667 dwellings a year. You will see that we have worked, and this committee has worked very hard to increase the number of permissions that we have granted. And you can see here pretty good number of units under construction over the last 4 or 5 years. However, in terms of completions, which is what we're judged on, you'll see there we're still around 1,100, and for the year just gone, we're going to be just under 1,000, and yet our target is currently 1,667. So it's always been around 1,600. So we're not meeting our targets, and we can and do get penalised on appeal as a result of that. Enforcement notices served. Apologies for this this graph. There was one enforcement notice served in the quarter and a one breach of condition notice served in the quarter, which should have been on this slide. We are continuing to investigate complaints, and we got new cases. We were also responsible for tree preservation order applications, and this sets out those received in blue and for works to trees and conservation areas in orange. And that's the application's been determined. Now, members, we're up to speed on these, but we're only up to speed because I've had to employ a consultant to get through this workload and get through the backlog. But we are there now, but we're continuing to need that consultant until I can fill the vacant tree officer post. We're also the lead local flooding authority who comment on planning applications. Many of you have met Gabby. She is an exceptional officer, and I'm sure you'll agree. Those of you who met her will agree with that. Complaints and compliments. Planning. Members, you know that we're going to make someone unhappy. If we approve it, the objectors are unhappy. If we refuse it, the applicants are unhappy. And so we do get a number of complaints to us. We have a 3-stage process. If people are unhappy, they can complain to me. I will, because most delegated applications I don't see, so I can look at them quite independently. If the applicants aren't happy with my response, they can take it to stage 2, which is to the Chief Exec's office. If they're still unhappy with that, they can go to the Ombudsman. Most complaints, we explain the process we've gone through, the things that we consider, and as a result of that, they may not be happy with the decision, but they can understand why it has been made. So that's why there are fewer. Most people are content when they've seen the stage 1 response. Of those cases that have gone to the Ombudsman, page 96 says that there were 3 cases that went to the Ombudsman. 2 were closed after initial inquiries, and the third one was not upheld. So 100% closure of cases by the Ombudsman. What I would like to draw members' attention to on page 96 is a compliment. It's very easy for people to complain. People don't normally take the time to make compliments. And there are some there that I really would like to draw your attention to. First bullet point, talking about design quality and how my officers have really worked hard with applicants and their architects to get them to improve the design quality of schemes. And the architects have been very grateful for that, because they themselves are pushing the applicants. And the applicants can sometimes say, no, just keep the money down, keep the costs down. And then, but those architects have been backed up by my officers saying the quality is not good enough, you've got to up your game. And that's what we've seen there. Third bullet point, I wanted to read this out because it says, just a quick email from me to say thank you to you and your team. I know it was a bit of a bumpy road back and forth with the design, but we got there in the end. I have to say, though, that the committee was certainly excellent and well run. I've seen a few over the years, and that was definitely one of the better ones.
It's before the election, by the way.
Then the next bullet point, many thanks for a very clear presentation yesterday. These things are really important. It's often hard to get officers and councillors at some of the local authorities to appreciate this. So really, again, thanking both officers and members. And then the second to last bullet point, talking about the best pre-application service that they have used. A really good comment. So I'm proud, and you as a committee should be proud of them as well. So any questions on the performance report, members?
Do you want to just update on 711, the neighbourhood plans?
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of neighbourhood plans, where we are with those, members, you'll know that Cliff and Cliff Woods has been adopted. It's been through a referendum. It's now part of the development plan. So any planning applications in Cliff and Cliff Woods, we must, and you must, consider the policies and what's said in the neighbourhood plan. High Houstow, they went to examination. The examiner came back and had some comments and concerns, asked them to pause, but on reflection, the neighbourhood planning group withdrew the neighbourhood plan and will be doing some changes to that, reflecting on the examiner's comments. In relation to Arches Local, we've just literally in the last couple of days received the examiner's comments on that. Very minor changes he's asking for. I'm sure the neighbourhood planning group will incorporate those, and we will go to a referendum probably in May next year. It could be earlier, but I think the neighbourhood planning group will agree to being in May to be at the same time as the Police and Crime Commissioner elections. Who have, and we've got Councillor Sands here as part of the neighbourhood planning group. They've submitted their plan to us, and we will see where that goes in terms of the examiner. What I do need to do, though, Councillor Sands, is arrange for the neighbourhood planning group to do a presentation on their neighbourhood plan to members, particularly this planning committee. Frinsbury Extra Parish Council, and we've got Councillor Etheridge here, the neighbourhood planning group there. They're still at quite an early stage at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Galvin.
Yes, just on the Arches one, because those in the sort of parishes, it's fairly easy to determine the area that you're actually talking about. For the Luton Arches one, for the referendum for that, have we got an area that is actually defined? Because you can't really do it on a ward basis, so it will have to be done on perhaps lower super output areas. What is going to be the criteria for the referendum area?
Chairman, the first thing that we do and members do as part of a neighbourhood planning process is agree the area for the neighbourhood plan. Yes. So that was done a couple of years ago. So that will be the area which will be the subject of the referendum.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I think credit is due to the Chief Planning Officer and his staff for the performance. I had one point on the enforcement DIA, which I'll make now, if you don't mind, Chair, and that is to stress the importance of vulnerable people who might be on the wrong end of a planning enforcement issue, by which I mean in terms of a number of of cases I've seen, both in planning, enforcement and noise enforcement cases, where the neighbour affected or neighbours affected have been vulnerable or elderly. And I think we need to bear this in mind in relation to keeping residents up to date with the progress of planning enforcement procedures, because they do have a greater impact the longer they go on, and necessarily they do sometimes go on a long time, a greater impact on vulnerable elderly residents, I find, from my experience as a ward member. But generally, with all this performance material, we seem to be ready for any changes that the government might impose or might announce, or might even have announced today. We're up with the number of applications processed, and I'm sure we're up with the number of delegated applications that delegated application decisions that should be made, which is a question I ask every time these reports come. We should, of course, be delegating 90% to officers at least. When it comes to the time, Chair, I shall be happy to move the noting of the report.
Any other member? Okay. Councillor, whoops, Daisy. Manageress.
So it's a quick one. I think Dave will know which case I'm referring to, but in a general sense, the thing around appeals and when they then go above us and take it nationally, do we know how that backlog's looking and how long they are generally taking now?
Chairman, that's a good question, and it varies. The Inspectorate have got a really good record in relation to public inquiries for proposed residential development, in terms of how quickly they get them to inquire and get the decisions out. In most cases, except for the one at Cliff, at the moment we were still waiting months and months after the inquiry. What I would say, though, is that we're seeing increasingly over the last year a delay in getting the decisions coming through. The biggest frustration I've got, and it picks up on the point that Councillor Jones was saying, is that enforcement appeals are taking an inordinate amount of time. Sometimes it's taking the Planning Inspectorate a year to validate the appeal, and then another year to do anything with it. And I have a real frustration about that, because people have been affected, you know, for 2 years or more while a decision has been made on an enforcement appeal. So they're having to live with something that we've considered to be unacceptable to their amenity, and I don't think that's acceptable. And I think the Planning Inspectorate should be focusing on that rather than proposed schemes which aren't impacting on anybody in terms of their daily living. So I have frustration there. You've got me on my soapbox again. Hopefully that helps answer that question.
Any other member? If not, I'm going to move to the Vice Chair to move a recommendation of noting the report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I believe we should note the reports that we received on performance, appeal decisions and enforcement, which we've duly considered. Thank you.
Is it agreed?
Agreed.
Excellent. Moving on to the appeal decisions. Mr. Harris.
Chairman, just very quickly running through these, what I bring to you are those appeals that have been allowed, or those appeals which relate to decisions where this committee have made a decision contrary to the officer recommendation. So going through these quickly, 45 Hawthorn Road. This was an application for quite a large extension to the property. It was refused under delegated powers. An inspector has allowed it. You can see how large the extension is here, but you can also see that you've got an existing large extension there and a garage there. So the inspector felt that because of that, the removal of this and the fact that that garage is there, the impact on neighbours was not unacceptable. He did, though, say the design, we'd also refused the design. He then considered the design to be acceptable. I don't tend to agree with him here. This is a two-storey flat roof rear extension. We would not normally consider that to be acceptable. How he could consider that to be in keeping with the dwelling house, I don't quite know. So if that application came in tomorrow, I would still be supporting my officers to refuse that. I don't think the inspector got it right, is my view. 143 Berringgrave Lane. So you've got Berringgrave Lane here. This is an old nursery on this site here. And members allowed this development in here because it's replacing existing buildings that were on the site. What they've done then is to take the adjacent field and to propose these 6 dwellings on that. Members took the view that, well, they had allowed this one because it was removing buildings which harmed the landscape, but this was on a green field, and therefore they were worried about, well, if that goes, then this goes, and these ones up here go, and we would see a bigger development. Inspector didn't agree. He felt that this was a relatively unused area of open land, and that was a more defensible boundary than this site. So he allowed the appeal. Fairview Avenue. This was a committee overturn. Conversion to takeaway. It had been allowed on appeal before. Members, when they considered it, felt that they did not agree with that previous inspector and so refused on almost the same grounds as they had done before. The new inspector said, "You've just ignored the previous inspector. I'm going to allow this appeal and I'm going to award costs against you." It's a lesson, frustrating lesson. I understand totally members' frustration and the original decision, but we have got to be cognizant of those previous appeal decisions. And then the final one, Councillor Fern has already raised this. This is the proposed winery out at Cuxton. This was a really interesting public inquiry. It was a Norman Foster designed building of exceptional quality. It was to cater for a vineyard, which is already located there, and it was for a business development. However, it is in the Greenbelt, and it is, importantly, in an area of outstanding natural beauty, quite close to, well, you can see it's also next to a conservation area in here. The proposal had a new access road coming in there, car park in here, and the building in here, but it's within the area of outstanding natural beauty. It was a really interesting public inquiry. I thought the applicants presented their case really well. I thought the council presented their case contrary to it really, really well. And I do think that the parish council and residents presented their case against the scheme really, really well as well. When it finished, talking to the barristers of either side, both said it could go either way. It was a 50-50 decision because it was a really, really balanced case. The economic benefits against the harm to the AONB. The inspector took the view that the building, whilst exceptionally well designed, in terms of some of its materiality, harmed the AONB. He felt that the car park in here was harmful to the area of outstanding natural beauty, and he also felt that there was some negativity to the conservation area. And on balance, considered that those harms outweighed the benefit from the scheme in terms of economic development. As Councillor Hubbard has said, I think a scheme will come back. And the reason for that is it is an existing vineyard there. So they've got to come up with something to cope with the vineyard. We will see how they've addressed those clear concerns that the inspector have. And then this committee will probably, in my view, have a new application before them in the new year and have to consider the balance of those issues then.
Thank you. Yeah, so expect the winery to come back in some form. and they wish to consult the applicants with members and, more in particular, parish members as well. So, yeah, basically planting out the vineyards is the issue that they have to address. Any member? If not, move to the Vice Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I now move that we note the report on appeal decisions.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Excellent. Okay, so on to the last item, which is the revised planning enforcement policy. Mr. Harris.
Chairman, this is just here to get members' comments. As it's a policy document, it will need to go via Cabinet to full council, but obviously Cabinet and full council would like to hear from the Planning Committee. Now, the enforcement policy was originally produced in 2008 and then revised in 2017. Myself and Alison Monk consider that it was appropriate to do some amendment to it now and put that to yourselves and to full council. So the amendments are relatively minor. It's updating the legislation. There on page 117, the National Planning Policy Framework has been amended to 2023. National Planning Guidance has been amended a number of times as well. In relation to page 118, under the Enforcement Service, just emphasising that we will not accept or investigate anonymous or vexatious complaints. We do get a lot of those, and we're not here to investigate someone who's just fallen out with a neighbour or who's just going to consistently complain to us about the same thing. However, we do recognise that some people, as Councillor Jones has touched on, don't want to be known for fear of repercussions, in which case they can lodge their complaint via their ward councillor, and at least it's not anonymous to us, we have someone to go back to. The other thing that we ask for is for those complaining to be very clear as to what they consider the breach is. Just saying, well, I don't think it's been built in accordance with approved plans. Well, in what way? I've only got 3 enforcement staff. I need some, I need some guidance here so for my staff to be able to maximise those limited resources. The other thing there, it touches on a point that Councillor Jones says. Again, I need to make sure that my staff are doing their main job, which is undertaking the investigations. I don't want them spending 3/4 of a day updating people to say, I'm sorry, we haven't been able to do this. I'm sorry, we haven't been able to do this yet. I'm sorry, we haven't been able to do this yet. What we'd like to do is to update people when we've got something fundamental to tell them. And we will notify them in writing, either by email or by letter. Page 121, a couple of things I want to point out there. Priorities. We get thousands of complaints a year. Some are relatively minor, some are very, very serious. We've just been doing some public inquiries in relation to some of those. So we have to prioritise the cases. So those which are causing significant or serious harm to an area or a building will be given the highest priority. Those that are relatively minor will not be investigated quite so quickly. Also, emphasising something that members know from their training is just because there is a breach of planning control does not mean that we will take enforcement action. We will only take enforcement action if we would refuse planning permission. Then going on to page 122, the various approaches that we've got to enforcement action. The first stage, very clearly in the National Planning Policy Guidance, is negotiation. Try to get it resolved without having to serve formal notices. So that's what we do all the time. And indeed, Councillor Etheridge knows one that has taken up a lot of my time recently in Town Road. Took time, but we got there in the end through negotiation. And the complainant is happy, which is good. And he thanked yourself for your time on that as well, didn't he, Councillor Etheridge? The one change in that is the planning enforcement order. The reason that's been brought in is as a result of someone who built a house, but he built it inside of a load of hay bales, left it there for 4 years, then took the hay bales down and said, hey, look, the house has been there for 4 years, it's immune from enforcement action now. The government didn't take kindly to that, the courts didn't take kindly to that, so they brought in the planning enforcement order, which says that if a person deliberately conceals something, we can take action. Really good news. And that is really it in terms of changes, Chairman. Thank you.
Any member? If not, I'll move to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that the committee has considered and noted the enforcement policy.
Is that agreed, by the way?
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you. That's the end of the meeting. Until 4 weeks' time. Bye.